record. Okay, so today we are going to do Accounts Receivable 101 Part 2. We've already been through, and you can see my screen, right? Great. We've been through all the setup, and we've also been through the customers, um, which, is the next thing you have to do. So anything in Sage, you start with getting all the setup information done and then the framework for your customers, and then you can enter your customers. So we're going to dive right into transactions. And of course, as always, stop me if you have any questions. So the first thing we're going to look at is the invoice batch list. I personally like to work from the batch list screens. So that would be invoice, receipt, adjustment, and refund. And the reason for that is because you can really see and do everything that you need to do from the screen concerning data entry. You can see what's not posted. You can go back by clicking this show posted and deleted. You can go back and view a batch that was posted previously. You can confirm, if it was posted. You can confirm what the posting sequence was, which is right here. And you can open it, you can create a new one, you can print, so you can get everything done from here. And I personally like that, personally, but it's certainly perfectly fine for you to go just directly into the invoice entry screen, but I just find this a little easier. So now, does your data flow in? Your data doesn't flow in from another application. It's just data entry. Okay.
I I have a question, and this is more for Bobby and me trying to understand our process. Who now enters once we've invoiced for something? Who enters that information now into our Sage system?
You're looking at me.
Okay.
Okay, so more to be determined. Okay, so is there an availability or a way to online approve batches, or is it whoever enters it?
Okay, yep. So the way you can separate out those duties is by, let's just jump on to administrative services and let's look at our security groups. We're going to look at accounts receivable, and we're going to maximize the screen. So setup, actually, I think I'll just pull it down. It's a little easier that way. So invoice entry, of course, is one function, and that's right here: receipt entry, adjustment entry, and refund entry down here. Um, but invoice posting is another process. So the way you could do that if you wanted to separate your duties would be have one individual with rights to do invoice entry and then give someone else the invoice posting process, and or the set invoice batch ready to post. So in order to post, you have to either set the batch ready to post, or um, when you post a batch that's not set ready to post, it asks you, this batch is not ready to post. Do you want to post it? So the person who posted would need that set ready to post. So that would be a way that you could, you know, do that. Now, as far as approvals, that's more traditionally thought of in an AP capacity, where you would have AP automation, where you would enter an invoice and it would go to somebody to be approved. And then once approved, it would route and land in an accounts payable batch.
Right, we're
So,
gonna look at that in the future, but I was
okay.
just right now with us moving to an AR module, I was thinking that the people that actually do the invoicing, um, once it's invoiced, if they do the entry and then Bobby reviews and posts is
Yeah.
a lot
Well, so
different than,
I mean, that's in theory how we do it because they send me all their billing information and I like look over and approve it and then make the journal entry and then Scott approves the journal entries that were done.
Mm-hmm.
So that would mean that if that's what you want, then we have to give Tamika, Sanaj, Aaron, Laura, Nicole all access to Sage as well then.
yep.
So where does
And Scott should not be approving them because he's doing budgets, like that's his job. So you should be able to approve it because you're not doing revenue. We're getting you away from that. So we can talk about it further.
yeah. But yeah, it's all in security, and in Sage you can have for each module you can have as many security groups as you want slash need based on how you're slicing and dicing your roles.
Okay.
Yep. So anyway, yeah. So that is that. So anyway, as you know, to create a new batch, you simply click on the new button. And I'm a big fan of descriptions, so put that in here. We'll just say billing May, whatever. Now, remember we talked yesterday or Monday about the item versus summary billing. So I'm going to show you an example of both, and then you determine which one is appropriate for your company. So we're going to do sample item billing. All right, so we're going to use customer 1200. And the document type is invoice. In Sage AR, you can have three types of documents. You can have an invoice, a debit note, which would increase the balance of an existing invoice, or a credit note, which would decrease the balance of the existing invoice. We'll talk about all those. Um, so right now it's going to be invoice, and we are going to just use today for the document date. So document date, this determines how it ages in accounts receivable. So based on your terms, if it's net 30 or due upon receipt or whatever, this document date is how the system is going to age that. The next field is the posting date. So in the first session, we talked about what was going to be your default posting date in your company setup and AR setup options. So you can see right now, if I change 0507, now my posting date goes to 0507. And that is the most typical way. The other options being using your batch date or your login session date. So the posting date determines what year and period it's going to land in the general ledger. Almost in most circumstances, just about all of them, especially in AR, these will be the same. But if you are entering an invoice and you want it to age as of a certain date, but you want to post it to the GL, maybe a prior date or a subsequent date, you can change that and drive when it lands in the general ledger. The next field is document number, and this asterisk new means that the system is going to assign the next available document number. And we talked about using a prefix of IN followed by the year. So it would be IN 2024 and then whatever the next sequence number is. PO number and order number, they are optional. Now, if you had order entry, these fields will populate through the order entry or from the order entry system when it lands in AR, but you're not using order entry. You can use these fields for anything you want. So, purchase order number or any kind of note that you want to describe what's going on with this invoice. Same goes for shipment number. That would flow in from order entry if you had that module. Because in order entry, you place an order and then you ship that order to the customer and then you create an invoice, which then gets sent to AR. But right now, these are essentially optional fields for you to utilize however you want. Same goes for the special instructions. Ship via, you're not shipping goods, so that's really not going to apply. So you can use this field for something else as well.
I don't
So,
see a world where we use item
okay,
ever.
okay. So we'll just go through it and then we'll do summary. So we
Okay.
created an item the other day called room and board. And it looks like I didn't sign this up, set this up correctly, but anyway, the quantity would be 4, and then it would extend out to 400, and that's what an item style invoice looks like. Okay, so the difference between item is you set up your items in AR setup, and then you bill with a quantity, and then the price extends out. So the other type of invoice is summary. Okay. Now notice what happens when I choose item. Notice this grid has item number, unit of measure, description, quantity, unit price, extended amount, etc. As soon as I change this to a summary, my grid becomes distribution code, which of course is optional, a description, and a revenue account. So you're choosing your revenue account here rather than attaching it to a specific item. So we're going to use our same customer 1200, and it's going to again be an invoice. I'm going to let the system auto number, and I will use my room and board distribution code, and notice that automatically sets my revenue account to 4100, and I'll use my amount $400. Then if you want to add another line to this, you would just like at anything in Sage 300, you'd press the insert key and put something else in there. You know, whatever it would be, like maybe they're paying for their cable TV, or something like that. You could add that to the invoice. Um, as you know, you're tax exempt, so these would come out as zeros. Terms come in from the customer. Terms are calculated for this invoice based on the document date and the customer terms. You can change these customer terms as needed. If you had optional fields attached to your transactions in AR, these would show up here, and you could put, figures or values or text in here. And by the way, you can set this up so that optional fields for transactions flow all the way into the general ledger if you want. So that is an option. Sales split has to do with salespersons, which of course we're tracking in the sample data, but you probably will not be tracking it. And then of course the totals are listed right here. Okay, so I'm just going to add. And we're going to chat next about debit notes and credit notes. So I'm going to go into customer inquiry and pull up some data so we can apply a credit note against an open invoice. So I'm going to go to my documents screen here, and you can see that invoice number 2 has a balance of $1958.98. So I'm going to apply a credit note against that document. So I'm going to use the same customer number. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to change the document type. So if you choose credit note or debit note, it's going to do the same. The screen is going to change in the same way. So as soon as I choose credit note, you're going to notice on the right, a field is going to pop up. So that field is called apply to document, and it's actually a pretty important field. It's not mandatory because sometimes we do credit notes that do not apply to a specific document and they're just kind of open credit notes. But if you want to apply a credit note to a specific document, you want to enter that here. Otherwise, what you're going to end up is a plus $100 for the original invoice and then a minus $100, for example, but they're not tied together and you have to tie them together as a separate step. And by the way, this is exactly the same as accounts payable, okay? So I'm going to click my Finder. I'm going to choose my invoice number 2 and I'm going to click on that. And now I'm going to make it a summary style, and I'll just use my RB distribution code, and I will just say $150. Okay. And I'm going to add that. Same way, credit note works the same way, except for with a credit note, you're increasing an invoice balance. With with a credit note, you're decreasing an invoice balance. And with a credit note, or debit note, you're increasing. I'm getting myself confused. So I also wanted to show you what it looks like if you don't apply it to a specific document. So again, I'm just going to do a credit note. I'm going to leave this blank, unapplied example, and it'll be a summary. I'll use the same one, and we'll just make that a $50 credit note. Now this sample data will charge sales tax, so it's going to be a little different than $50, but we'll see how that looks. So now we have some transactions. You can see my number of entries up in the upper corner is 4. My total amount is $974.25. The credit notes are subtracted. That's from the total. So that's just good to realize that. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to set this invoice batch as ready to post, and I'm going to post it. And then we're going to look at this customer's account. So I'm going to look at this. I'm going to refresh it. So remember, our document total here is $1958.98. I'm going to hit this button to refresh it. Notice now I've got a credit note here that's unapplied, and I've got, why didn't that credit note apply to this invoice? What did I do here? All right, let's take a look. See what I did wrong. All right, so here's my document. And notice, by the way, oh, I know why, because I made it a credit note. No, I didn't. What did I do wrong? I am confused. So here's oh, somehow I changed that to a credit note or an invoice. Probably, okay, probably what I did is I showed you, I changed the document type and then it resets it. So let me do another credit note. And I'll just do this real quick. Credit note. And this is going to be applied to document number 2. This one. And this will be applied credit note. Room and board. And $150. It's going to add sales tax. That's fine. And now, by the way, I should point out that you can post it from inside the invoice batch if you have the rights to do so, or you can come back out and post it from here. Okay, so I'm going to post that. And now I'm going to hit my refresh. And notice now I've got a document. My original document was $1958.98. My applied amount was 162. That's my credit note, remembering that did have sales tax on the $150. And now my current balance is 1796.60. So when I'm highlighting this document here in the customer inquiry, I can see all my information about the original invoice here. And then in this lower section, I can see that there was a receipt posted, and then there was a receipt that was reversed, and then there was a credit note. So this gives you the history of everything that's been applied to this document. Now, this unapplied credit note, notice, is just hanging out there. It's not applied to anything. So in order to apply that credit note, we would have to go into receipt batch and do an apply document, which we will do. So that's basically everything you wanted to know about invoice entry, debit note, and credit note. One more thing on the batch listing. This post all button that came out a few versions ago. What that does is it's going to post everything that's set ready to post. So you can see I have a handful of batches that are set ready to post. So when I click post all, and we'll let it go, and we're good. And I'm really happy because we have some errors, because I'm going to be able to show you what to do about those. So what this is telling me is, now I set this company is set for auto posting through to the general ledger. So right here, it's going to tell me that something happened during my GL posting. So that brings us to posting errors and how to hunt them down. So, excuse me. So if I go to my general ledger, I know this is an AR class, but I'm going to show you how to find that. If I go to my batch list and I clear this, I can see I've got some errors here. So, so what's happened is that I have a whole bunch of errors, actually. So this tells me right here that error from batch 395. So to find out why something in Sage was an error, and this applies to AP, general ledger, and accounts receivable, the first thing you do is you look and you see, okay, what was my original batch? So in this example, 395 was my original batch. So I'm going to show posted and deleted. I'm going to go to 395, and I'm going to scroll over until I can find my posting sequence number. And then right here, that posting sequence is 103. So in general ledger, what I would do is I'd go to GL reports, and in general ledger, it's posting journals, and I'd click posting journal errors, and I just want posting sequence 103, and I'm going to print this and find out why it didn't post. And a lot of people don't know about this, so we have some invalid accounts. So yep, that would do it. So there's something wrong with my sample data where we have an invalid GL account. So what you would do is you would go into the GL batch and fix it, or if needed, you would go and add that account. Now, to find posting errors in accounts receivable, it's in a little different place. It's under AR transaction reports, and then AR and AP has its own posting errors icon. And the reason for that is because there's many types of batches in AR and AP. So in this example, in AR, you've got invoice, batch, receipt, adjustment, or refunds. So you would need to know what type of batch we encountered the error. And again, you would go over to your posting sequence, which is over in your batch list, and it is right here, this column right here, okay? So you would enter your posting sequence, and then you'd print that, and it would tell you exactly why this batch didn't post. And a lot of people don't know about this. Just yesterday, I had a client say, I have a posting error. What's going on? And it's right here. It'll tell you exactly why. And it could be things like in common services, you've got a locked fiscal period, or at the beginning of the year, you may have created your new fiscal year in common services, but if you haven't created the new fiscal year in general ledger, then that batch from AP and AR is going to roll into an error batch because in general ledger it has nowhere to go, basically. So that's how you find out in all the modules, why do I have a posting error? The other thing I recommend with posting errors is don't change the name of the batch. If you've got a posting error, just leave it because there's information here that's important. So it shows that it's an error batch. It originated in batch 395. So a lot of people change the description and they kind of lose their audit trail. So what this is telling me is one or more entries did not post from batch 395, and that's good information. So just leave it as it is. Now, if you want to add something at the end of it, you've still got, stuff you can put in here, but I wouldn't change the whole thing. So that covers posting errors. So now we've got an invoice batch and we've got some information in our customer inquiry here. So the next thing we're going to do is take a look at receipt batches. Okay. So in receipt batches,
I have a question, Carol.
okay.
So that was based on doing a detailed invoice versus a summary one. Is the summary one significantly different?
No, I showed you both. Let's review. I'll review that with you.
I thought it was you did a summary credit memo.
No, I did a summary invoice as well. So let me show
Okay.
you. I'll show you. We can review it. So this one is an item invoice. The only difference between item and summary is what you see down here in the grid. So an item style invoice is going to have an item number, a unit of measure, and a description. Both of them have that. It's going to have a quantity, a unit price, and an
Yeah.
extended amount. Okay. A summary style invoice is simply going to have a description, a revenue account. Distribution code is optional. You don't have to use it. You can just go straight to your GL account. And this description here will print on the invoice. And I should have said, I didn't talk about this, but there's also the comment field will also print on your invoice. So a comment field is going to give you more detail about your invoice. So the description is going to be kind of a short
Yep.
line, and then a comment. I think you've got like up to 250 characters where you can talk about and describe what your services were. So the comment's optional. If you enter a comment, just make sure you double click on the print comment if you want it to appear on your invoice. Okay.
Okay. And then just one more question. And I think you answered it last time, but I don't remember. At the customer level, can you set up a default revenue account?
No, no. In AP, yes. In accounts payable, yes, but not in AR.
Okay.
Because, yeah, I mean, the way you would do a default if you have something that's repetitive in AR is through recurring charges. And a lot of people who have recurring charges will set them up with zero amounts. If there's like a monthly kind of bill, but it changes every month, you set it up with a zero amount and then go fill in the amounts after you run it, after you create your recurring.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure. I guess the reason why, excuse me, I'm congested. The reason why you don't set up a revenue account, I think, is the theory is you can sell whatever to a customer rather than, in AP, it's typically your vendor is usually or frequently for the same thing over and over. But with your customer, it could be any number of things. So
I
there's
get that logic. It just doesn't necessarily apply
apply
in
to
our,
you.
but
Yeah, yeah. Yep. So the next thing we're going to chat about is receipts. So our receipts, I'm going to create a new receipt batch. So there's some really important things to understand with receipts. There's the first thing is transaction type. The second thing is your dates. The dates are really important.
mhm.
So your
For
date
bank rec, right?
for bank rec, yes. And this
Mhm.
is, if you screw this up, it's really difficult to fix. So what I tell people to do is before you even enter a transaction, and I'm going to show you how, this could, changes or whatever. Before you enter your first transaction, make your batch date the deposit date because your batch date is going to set your defaults for all of this information. So there's 3 dates in receipts. The batch date, which actually does not impact it sort of impacts your transaction dates because it sets your defaults. But if your batch date is one thing and your transactions are another thing, it's always going to use a transaction date. So in receipts, you've got a deposit date and a receipt date and a posting date. So the batch date is going to set my default. So if I say my batch date is yesterday, okay, 0507, notice my receipt date is now changed from my first entry to 5/7. My deposit date does not get set until I've added one transaction. Okay, and I'll do that and I'll show you how that looks. So my transaction types, we're going to look at all of them, but we've got receipt. That is where you're paying something that you've invoiced a customer for. There's a prepayment. That's where you're getting a deposit. A prepayment creates a liability for services yet to be rendered. Unapplied cash is similar to a prepayment, but it doesn't create that liability. So the journal entry that happens for prepayment is a debit to cash and a credit to that liability. For unapplied cash, it creates a debit to cash and a credit to accounts receivable. Apply document is where you take either a credit note or a debit note that's unapplied, credit note that's unapplied, or a debit note that's unapplied, or a prepayment or an unapplied cash that's unapplied. If you're applying a prepayment, what's going to happen is um, it's going to debit that liability and credit accounts receivable. Okay, so that's how that works. It doesn't impact cash because cash was already impacted when you entered the prepayment or the unapplied cash. The last transaction type is miscellaneous receipts. A miscellaneous receipt is where you're receiving funds for from either a customer for something that hasn't yet been billed or something that has nothing to do with the customer. Could be a donation, and you haven't set the donor up as a customer, and that journal entry is going to be a debit to cash and a credit to whatever GL account you choose. So if you look down here at the grid here, you can see you've got apply, document type, document number, document date, all that. But if you change this to miscellaneous receipt, now you've got GL account, account description, amount. So this is going right to some revenue account If it's for a customer, it will automatically create an invoice that's automatically being paid in that customer, and it will update that customer's history.
So like if we
So,
get a one-time donation,
correct. Yep.
in form of a check or cash
Uh-huh.
or,
Yep.
right, okay.
Yeah, so some of my not-for-profit clients who receive donations create a customer account called donations or something like that. And then they do a miscellaneous receipt into that customer. The only thing you get out of that is some customer history. You can put the payer's name in, or you would leave, if you are not worried about creating customer history, then you would leave the customer number blank and just put the payer here. Okay. So it just really depends on what kind of history you want to build, um, and so on. So anyway, we're going to look at receipt first, and we're going to use our customer 1200. All right. We are going to create a payment of a check. We'll talk about the different payment code types as well. You would put the check number in here and whatever my amount is. And then I'm going to hit my little go button. It's going to populate the grid with everything that's outstanding for this customer. And then I just double click the apply to apply that amount to that invoice. So up here, you can see my receipt on applied is 1500. When I click on yes and then move out of that line, now my receipt applied is 0. So I've applied that entire receipt. Okay. So I'm just going to add that. Now notice what happens to my deposit date when I add. All right. Now I have a deposit date. It's assigned a deposit number, and that'll show up in the bank rec. This deposit date is what hits the bank rec, okay? This receipt date is what hits the AR. This posting date is what hits the general ledger. Now here's where people make mistakes and their bank rec turns into a nightmare. They say, oh, this should have been on the 6th, and I'm going to change my batch date. Notice my deposit date doesn't change. And if I say, okay, now it's the 6th, notice my receipt date doesn't change because this entry has already been made. So if I change my deposit date, I've got to go into all my entered transactions and make sure I change my receipt date because it's really important for this date and this date and this date to be the same, okay? If these two dates are not the same, if they're within the same month, it's not that great of a deal, okay? But if your receipt date is June and you forgot to change it and it really was a May 31st, that deposit is not going to land in your bank rec. If you reverse it, it doesn't fix up all the dates. The reversal occurs on whatever your reverse date is. It doesn't give you an option to reverse the deposit date as one thing and the receipt date is another. So making sure that your batch date is whatever your deposit date is before you start adding entries will save you a mountain of headache, potentially.
Carol, I have lots of, well, um, so our biggest quote unquote customer, or one of them, would be the state of Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And that can be a very convoluted process. Billing entry and adjustments that are made throughout the month. And then how do we tie when there's adjustments? How would we tie them? Just trying to think because it's so messy.
Okay, so
Um,
so there's a couple things. So if you know before the receipt is entered that you're going to adjust something up or down, usually it would be down. Remember in our AR setup options, let me get to there. Okay, let's look at that field. It's the AR setup options. So in my processing, actually in my transactions section, allow adjustments in receipt batch is down here, okay? That'll allow you to make an adjustment as you're entering a receipt. So in the example of our last transaction, okay, here, so notice I didn't pay off this entire invoice. If I wanted to make an adjustment here, I could do that by clicking adjust. And I don't know if this applies, but this is one option. So, so we're just going to say adjustment. All right. And we'll just say 4,000 is my GL account. And then state of PA. And then, so this is where you can mess this up. So if I want to adjust this down, okay, so with adjustments, and this applies if you're entering adjustment inside a receipt batch or if you're just creating an adjustment batch, up here is what's going to happen to my sales account or my revenue account. So if I debit this, it's going to reduce my revenue. If I credit this, it's going to increase my revenue. Now, people get confused here and think that this is what's actually happening to the AR control account. It's not. It's actually what's happening to the revenue account. So if I say, for example, I'm going to adjust 296.60. All right. Now I'm going to press the insert key and notice down here, it's going to show me what's happening to AR here. Okay. This field here, receivables adjustment total, shows me I'm reducing receivables by 296.60, and I'm debiting whatever revenue account I have up here. People get this going the wrong way, and then they've increased, or they've doubled up, what then they have to fix. So that's one way to make that adjustment. So I'm going to hit close, and I'm going to hit save. And it worked because it didn't complain. Okay. So you can adjust. If I scroll over now, I can see my adjustment is here. And, you can see all that information here. Okay. So my applied amount from the check is $1,500. But if I scroll over, my adjustment amount is $296.60. So I'm going to move this column over here so they're together, and see my net balance here. Actually, probably better to move it over here so you can kind of see current balance. Let me move this. Current balance, applied balance, adjustment amount, net balance after this is posted. So that's one place. So if you get a payment and you know right then and there that they're adjusting something down, then you can do it right here. Otherwise, you can do it with a credit memo or in an adjustment batch, which we'll talk about, today as well. Okay. So the next transaction type we'll look at is a miscellaneous receipt. So if this is for a one-time donor, we can put the person's name here. So Kathy Smith, and maybe you had a campaign for donation, whatever. And then if it's a check, you can put the check number here. And let's say they gave you $50 and my revenue account, I don't know what it's going to be. We'll pick one. Miscellaneous income sounds great. And that's $50. Okay, and so that's a miscellaneous receipt. So you notice instead of it reducing accounts receivable, it's going to go directly to revenue. And that's what a miscellaneous receipt does. We can also apply a miscellaneous receipt to a customer, or for miscellaneous where we don't want to apply or set up a customer, you can just put the payer in here. So you can see now my total amount of this deposit is $1,550. Okay. So I'll just say my deposit on 5/6/2024. Now, let's do another one because I want to talk about, I think we've got some miscellaneous payment code options. So let's say you received an ACH, okay? And if you recall, we set that up in AP setup. Let's see, payment code. Let's see, payment codes. So we've got, of course, ACH, which is a cash type, because you don't have a check number. It's going to, go right into your account. And then cash and check. So we talked about that the other day. So we're going to use an ACH. Now, when you use ACH, you can put a reference if you've got a reference in your bank account, or you can leave it blank. And let's do it for a customer again. We'll use the same customer. Let's say it's $100. I'm going to hit my go button. Now, we talked the other day about pending transactions. So I've already got a receipt in this batch for this customer. So it shows that I have a pending amount here. And my pending balance is 0 for this invoice. So I can't apply this payment to this invoice because you can't over apply payments to an invoice. You can't apply more than the balance of an invoice. So this pending is helpful. It gives you, I can't apply it there. So I'm going to apply it here. I'm also going to take this credit note and I'm going to, well, I'll do that in a separate transaction. So forget that. So I've applied $100 to this invoice and I'm going to hit add. Okay. So that's an ACH. So you can kind of differentiate your payment codes if you want. So I'm going to go ahead and post this. But before, I think I will print my deposit slip. Again, this is an optional thing, but if you've entered a stack of checks, you can print this out and take it to your bank, and the bank will accept this along with your MICR encoded deposit slip that contains the total. Okay, so that's helpful. And then I'm going to set this ready to post, and I'm going to post. So that's cash, and that's check entry. Next, I'm going to show you how to apply a document. So we're going to create a new batch. I'm just going to call this apply document. So we're going to use customer 1200 again. So let's go back to our customer inquiry, and I'm going to refresh it. And now you can see that $1,700 invoice is no longer listed because I haven't checked include fully paid, but I do have a credit note in here somewhere that I can apply. Okay, right here, this credit note. Okay, so I'm going to apply that to something. Okay, so I'm going to go back here, and I am going to change my type here to apply document. And when you do an apply document, this field pops up, document number, and you have to choose what you're applying. So you can see we have a handful of things to apply here. I'm going to use this credit note here. I'm going to hit go, and then I can apply it to something. So I'm going to apply it to this invoice number 62, and that's that. And I'm going to uncheck this, and I'm going to post it. So this creates nothing in the general ledger. This does not create an entry in the GL. It's just going to get rid of that unapplied credit note by by applying the document to it. Okay. So now if I go and I find invoice 62, wherever it is, I can see that credit note. So I'm highlighting invoice 62. I can see we have a payment of $100 that we did a few minutes ago. We have a credit note that was applied for 5413. So you've got a history of what's been happening in this invoice. Okay. We didn't talk about unapplied cash and prepayments. So what we can do is we can enter a couple of those. So we'll do that to customer 1200. So the document type is going to be unapplied cash. And I'll make that. Notice there's no grid down here because it's unapplied cash. So it's just going to debit cash and then put a credit in that customer's account. Okay. Now the other thing we're going to talk about is a prepayment. Okay. So prepayment, same customer. Now, in a prepayment, you still get your receipt amount. We'll make it $1,500. And in here, you can apply to a future invoice if you know what that document number is going to be. Now, in your case, you probably aren't going to know what that document's number is going to be. But, in some companies that use order entry, you can apply it to an order, that hasn't come to AR yet. But that doesn't really apply to you. So you would probably just always leave that blank. Once again, the difference here is you're going to get a debit to cash and a credit to a liability. So I'm going to add that, and then I'm going to post this batch, and then we're going to jump into the GL, and we're going to take a look at the transaction that created for both of those entries. So going back to the GL, we're going to go to GL transactions, and we're going to find the AR batch that we just created. Okay, I think it probably posted it, so we'll go to the last one. Yep, so there's our $2,500 batch for the $1,000 and the $1,500. So the first entry was on applied cash. So you can see it's debiting AR. Sorry. Wait a minute, which one? That was on applied cash. So it's crediting AR and debiting cash. Okay. Now our prepayment is debiting the cash and crediting the prepayment liability. Okay, so those are the differences between those two accounts or those two transaction types. This one establishes a liability, the other one just gives you a negative in AR. Okay, so that's how that works. So that's the different kinds of transactions that you might have in a receipt batch. Any questions on that? It's pretty straightforward. Now the next thing, let's just jump quickly into bank rec, and we can see those transactions that have hit our bank rec. So of course I don't even know which bank
Carol,
we used. Yep.
I do have a question. When we set up the new company
Mm-hmm.
in the new system, what's the time frame to have some of these modules that we currently don't use?
When we set up the new company, I'm going to activate everything that you're going to use.
Okay.
So immediate. But of course, we have to do some setup.
Correct.
Hopefully between what we talked about the other day in our part one, and today you'll be getting some ideas as to how you do want to set that up. So yeah, wait, we're going to activate everything. And then we're going
Okay,
to immediately be able to start pulling data in and setting that up. So yeah, so that's going to be, we're
got
not
it.
going to, yeah, we're not going to do it piecemeal. This,
Okay.
yeah,
Um,
so
and, and Nathan did reply that he is available tomorrow at 1 if you want to send the meeting
I
invite.
can do that. Yep, I can do
Okay.
that. Yeah, just send me his info, or did you copy me on that email?
I did. I copied you
Okay,
on it
all right,
and
we'll
he
do that.
copied you on the response.
Perfect. I'll do that. Excellent.
And
Okay.
Bobby, if you want, you can be part of it. It's just really setting up the new company.
Yeah,
I can do it if you want.
Okay.
good. All righty. So that's receipts. So let me just close that. We're just going to jump, like I said. Actually, I do want to look and see what bank I've been using so I know which bank to look at. And that brings me to another thing that I didn't talk about. So each receipt batch is tied to one bank, which makes sense. You know, you wouldn't have a batch that you'd split between bank one and bank two. So at the entry in this batch header area is where you choose the bank where this deposit's going to go. So this is deposit 48 dated 5/6. So we're going to find that in our bank rec. So I'm going to go to, we're going to go to bank services, bank transactions. We'll go to reconcile statements for bank CCB, and let's enter the right date. So the date entered here is going to drive what shows up on the reconciliation tab. I know we haven't talked about bank rec, but anyway, we're going to pull this in, and I'm going to choose transaction type. I just want to look at deposits. I'm going to hit the end key, and I can see there's my deposit 48 for $2,500 that we did for the other day, and then here's my other one for $1,650. So both of these deposits show up here. All right. So what happens if a customer bounces a check? Okay. So if a customer bounces a check, you go to bank services to reverse transactions. So the transaction flow for AR, and by the way, it's the same for AP, is for anything that impacts cash, is and it goes to the general ledger, but it also updates your bank rec sub ledger. Okay. So if you need to do a reversal, you're going to do it in common services. So you're going to have to figure out who has access to make this, entry if something bounces. So I'm going to go to our bank CCB. What is the source application for reversing a transaction? My options are accounts payable, accounts receivable, bank services, and if you had the payroll module, that would show up as well. Okay. In this example, it's going to be accounts receivable. And we're just going to say returned check is my reason. Reversal date is real important. The reversal date is going to determine when that reversal shows up in my bank rec. It's going to determine when it goes back as an outstanding item in accounts receivable and when it hits the GL. So remember when I said if my deposit date is not the same as my receipt date, and I have to reverse it, there's only one date. So if those dates are not the same, you can't say, well, reverse the deposit date this date, but reverse the AR date that date. You can't, you only have one. So that's why if that is entered incorrectly, it turns into a major headache. So anyway, reversal date, very important. Deposit date, receipt date being the same, Very important. So I'm going to reverse it as of the date of the deposit. And then my customer number, of course, is 1200. Now it gives me the option of pulling up a transaction. And I'm going to use this one, and there's a reason for that. So this one is the one I'm going to reverse. Now, if it's a miscellaneous receipt, so what happens when I reverse a check in accounts receivable is it credits cash and then it goes back in as an outstanding item in AR. And by the way, if you reverse a check in AP, it does the same thing. It becomes an outstanding invoice in accounts payable. Same thing. Um, but if it was a miscellaneous receipt, it gives you the option to reverse the invoice. So there's a checkbox that would show up where you can reverse the invoice and then it doesn't become an outstanding item. Now, that doesn't actually show up here because I think it was a miscellaneous customer that we did that miscellaneous receipt for, so that doesn't really apply. But this one here, I'm going to just reverse that and I'm going to post it. And now that whatever that invoice paid is now going to become, that balance is going to increase because we reversed the check. So that would show up again in the AP, the AR customer. So that's how you reverse a deposit. And that's going to impact both your bank rec and your AR customer. Okay. So back to AR transactions, there's also a receipt inquiry screen. So this is a pretty big screen. So you would choose the bank if you wanted to. You can narrow down your search by customer. And when you do that, it kind of blinks. What's happening is it's querying the database. And so I'm just going to do for this customer. So now I've got all my receipts from this customer. You can also do it from to receipt date. It shows that the status is either cleared or returned or outstanding. So, it gives you a lot of information about, your receipts, so that's receipt inquiry. If I click on document, it'll open up that original entry where you can see, what invoice it paid and, all of that. So that's receipt inquiry. And that works similarly to AP payment inquiry. So it's kind of the same thing. So you can look things up on screen. And by the way, in that screen, you can also, once you fill it in, you can also print that and it'll print whatever you've got on this screen, okay, if it's just for one customer or what have you. So it's useful if you're looking something up. Quick receipt entry, honestly, I don't know anyone who uses this, but you can create a batch from here. You can put in your customer, payment type, account number. I honestly don't know why you would use this. Yeah, you can enter, but it's not applying it to anything. So I guess if you're just trying to slap out a receipt, but again, it's not applying it to anything. So if I insert here, whoops. Let me delete that line. So now if I click open, then it opens the batch. So, this is basically doing unapplied cash. And then I can select and I can apply it. Not really sure why people would do that, but yeah, it's an option. We can apply it to this invoice. So it's basically a way to quickly get a receipt in to the system, but again, you're not applying it. You have to open that transaction in order to apply it. So there it is. Adjustment, we talked about adjustments inside a cash batch. Of course, you can also make them, as they stand alone. So we'll just say cleanup here. So we're going to use good old customer 1200. Once again, the adjustment date and the posting date. This is when it hits AR. This is when it hits GL. You pick the document number you're adjusting. Okay. So I'm going to adjust this invoice here. And so this is actually kind of convenient. You can pick the line number. So if you're adjusting an invoice, if you choose the line number, that'll pick the GL automatically for you. So you can figure out, what GL was used. So I'm going to use adjustment line 1 or invoice line 1. Now, in your case, it's going to be a summary invoice, so you would just see, your revenue account here. But the nice thing about picking the line number is that you don't have to look up what GL account was used for this invoice because it'll show you. Once again, whatever account you're adjusting, the debit and the credit, whichever way you choose, is how it's going to impact that account. Not AR, but that account. So if I'm debiting that account, it's going to reduce my revenue. It's going to reduce my AR. Okay. So if I'm going to put $10 in here and press insert, my down below info shows me my AR total is going to credit AR. So by really keeping an eye on this line down here, you will not accidentally enter an adjustment going the wrong way. And that's what happens frequently. And then, then you have to adjust $20 because you've doubled up, what you needed to do. So anyway, that's how to do an adjustment. So just like everything else, you can set your batch ready to post and post it, and that'll update the customer's account. Post. I didn't like something, so I got an error batch. So let's find out. Oh, it looks like that was the GL. It was no, it was the AR. So we're going to look at an error batch. We're going to see why. So once again, it's from adjustment batch 5. So I'm going to check my show posted deleted. I'm going to scroll across my batch list until I get my posting sequence, which is 4. Then I'm going to go to my AR transaction reports, posting errors, adjustment, and it's posting sequence 4. I'm going to print. I'm going to see what I messed up here. All right. So what I did is I entered an adjustment in excess of the balance. So you can't over apply and then an adjust. You can't. If you've got a balance of $5, you can't do a credit to that for $10 because accounts receivable does not allow you to over apply invoices. So that's why. So once again, the error posting journal, which is in AR transaction reports, will tell you why it got rejected. So that's a good thing to remember. Okay, so I'm actually kind of glad that happened. All righty. The next thing, the last kind of transaction we're going to do is a refund. So a refund allows you to print a check to a customer. The advantage of this is you don't have to do it in accounts payable and create a vendor and use some sort of a clearing account to credit out the invoice, and then so you can just print that check directly to the customer. So I'm going to create a new batch. And so we're just going to say demo refund. It's going to be today. It's going to be customer 1200. Okay. I'm going to do a check. So you got to click and tell it that it's going to be a check. I'm going to hit print check. And then I'm going to close that. I'm going to choose the document number that I'm adjusting. Notice that even though I've got a whole lot of things outstanding for this customer, it's only going to pull up the items that have a credit balance. So I am going to pay back this unapplied cash of $1,000. All right. So there it is. Let's maximize that. Okay, and I'm going to payment amount. You've got to fill in your payment amount. Okay, and notice, so it shows the pending balance, the current balance, the payment amount. You got to put it in, and then the net balance. And then I hit add. And then when I'm finished entering my refunds, I would go in here, I'd click print post. It brings up, just like an AP batch, it brings up the check, printing window. I'm going to pretend that I'm printing this thing out. And there it is. Let's pretend I printed it out. And I close this. Were checks printed correctly? Yes, they were. And ready to post, not ready to post. Do you want to post? Yes. So that's refunds. Once again, you can also do a refund inquiry. Okay, so there are all my refunds. Haven't done a lot in the sample data, but there they are. Okay. Now, if I go back to my customer inquiry for customer 1200, and I have a tab here called refunds. Okay, I can see the one I just did. I have a tab for my receipts. I have a tab for everything, all documents, and a tab for my adjustments. So there they all are. So that's that. All right, so back to our transactions. We talked about refund inquiry, the post batches screen or item will post any batch that's been set ready to post. You can see you've got all 4 batch types. I don't usually go into this because I do my posting from the batch list screen, but you can do it from here as well. Okay. Document inquiry. It's another inquiry screen. So this is where you would pull something up by documents. So you would have to know the document number. If I pulled one up, you can see here's my document number. What kind of document was it? It was a summary. What was my customer number? You know, all the information about this document here. I can print my AR invoice from here if I want. So that's what it looks like. There it is. And regarding this printing of invoices, the delivery method here. So if I choose customer, if my customer is set to email, it would use the email method. Okay. So just be real careful with this. So if you've already printed an invoice, if I hit reprint invoice, make sure you're on a specific document to reprint because it's very easy to accidentally reprint every invoice you've ever sent to a customer. I've done this and it's embarrassing. You feel like a complete idiot when you've done it. So just be aware if I hit reprint invoices, make sure I'm only reprinting the one I want. Otherwise, you need to go back in time and, just something to be aware of when you're emailing. And then process credit card payments. This is where if you had credit card processing through Sage, you could process credit card payments, that are set to auto pay. So that's everything to do with transactions. The next thing we're going to talk about are our reports. AR setup reports, okay, these are just printouts of all the setup things that we talked about. Again, this isn't something that we usually print out, but if you need to for any reason, you certainly can. Customer reports, again, a listing of customer groups national accounts if you use them, your customer list. You can print out customers from here. You can also print out your activity or period statistics. Or if you're using comments to manage your collections, you can print out your comments from here. If you've set up a follow-up date in your comments, you can say, I just want to print out my follow-ups for, this week or through next week or something like that. And that would print out your comments. Okay. Recurring charges and ship to, again, this is just going to list out the recurring charges or ship to locations you've created. Statement letters and labels, that's an important one. If you are going to send out statements, you would do that here. You would choose the run date and your cutoff date. So if you're doing it at month end, you would put in that date here. Now, statements are only going to print out if that customer is flagged as getting statements. So let's remind you of where that is. So if I go to my processing tab, print statements is checked. If you set up print statements as a default in your customer group, I'll remind you where that is. As you add a statement or add a customer, that will be added automatically from your customer group. Okay. So if you're trying to print a statement for a specific customer and it's saying nothing to print, make sure that checkbox is checked for that customer. So anyway, here's our statements. I'm just going to do one customer because I don't feel like printing them out for everybody in sample data. All right. Once again, delivery method. If you've got email set up, you're going to want to use that customer delivery method. I don't in sample data, so I'm just going to use print destination. I'm going to hit print. And it's saying there's nothing to print. Why would that be? Because this customer definitely owes us money. So let's look at him again. 1200. Invoicing process. It wasn't checked. So there you go. There's your reason. All right. So I'm going to try this again. Now the system, all right, why? Okay, let me come out and refresh this. Maybe that's why. Customer reports, statements, and for customer 1200. Whoop. Let's try again. Why the heck isn't it printing? Because I know I
Because you're doing a lesson and that's why.
exactly. It's a demo, and I had this is what happens in real life. So 1200. I've set up to print statements, and I know he owes me money. All right. Credit status. Oh, he's got a big giant credit balance. That would do it. All right, let's pick on somebody else. Yeah, that's interesting that that's happening. But anyway, I'll just do everybody. All right, so we're gonna try again.
So it won't print if there's a credit balance?
Yeah, it seems like to me that it should.
It should. Like
Yeah,
40 years ago, like you didn't want to let people know they had a credit balance, but
right. But now,
times have changed a
yeah,
bit.
let's see. I bet. So I'm actually gonna say no, and I'm gonna cancel all these statements. Let's see if there's a setting in company profile that I need to look at here. So in options, it's got to be in options. Let's see, processing, statement options. Zero balance statements, maybe. I
Huh.
don't know why it wouldn't. Huh. Let me just, I don't know. Yeah, because to me, a credit balance, it should print out a statement, I would think. So let's go back and see if that changes things for us. So, all right. Okay, criteria. Okay. Yeah, I think that looks fine. So all customers will print. See what we get. All righty. All right, so that's customer. Yeah, it's not printing that one. Huh. Isn't that strange? Okay, this is a zero balance customer. Yeah, 1200 did not print. Well, you learn something new every day. I'll have to see what's up with that because that, to me, that's weird. Not sure why that would be. But anyway, this is your statement. Once they've printed, when you close the screen, it's going to ask you if statements were printed correctly. The system stamps when statements were printed because then you can go back, see this reprinted thing, and reprint any previously printed statements. So if I say no, it's going to ask me which statements I want to cancel. And, if I want to just say all, it would cancel this whole statement run. Okay.
Got it. I'm
Yep.
not really sure statements apply to
Okay.
what we
Yeah.
do. I
Right.
think AR aging would help, but I don't think we send out
Okay.
invoices or statements. So I'm
Okay.
not worried about it at all.
Okay.
And I know we're running up on time. So
Okay. The other reports, the other thing, periodic processing, the main thing you're going to do here is create recurring charges batch. Okay. We talked about that the other day. And update recurring charges. So if your room and board goes up, you can actually go in to say, I want to update my room and board for all customers, change by either percentage or amount. How do I want to change them? I want to increase by $25 and then process, and that will do it automatically for you rather than, one by one. Let's see, other important things. Create write-off batch. What a write-off batch does is it creates an adjustment batch. So if you've got any old transactions that you want to write off automatically rather than one by one, you can do that. And you can say all transactions maybe in excess of 700 days, like you're going to write them off if they're 2 years old. And if you want to just pick up those little scrappy amounts, you can say only from like maybe -50 to a +50. You're just going to write off the little bits. And then you can create an adjustment batch that you can then go and view, edit, delete transactions, and so on, so on. So if I do this, I'm not sure if I'm going to get any good. I got 7 adjustments. So it auto creates an adjustment batch. And I'm going to go to adjustments and I'm going to look at it. Where are they? Here we go. So this is my write-off batch. And then I can scroll through And if I say, well, I actually don't want to get rid of this one, I'm going to delete this entry, but I'm going to keep these entries, and then I'm going to post. Okay. And the last thing I want to remind you about is the AR aging. So if you're using the aging to just review your AR, age as of your cutoff date can be document date. So your cutoff date options are document date, posting date, or year period. Document date is going to be according to the accounts receivable document. Posting date is going to be the GL posting date. So if you are trying to balance to your general ledger, you want to use posting date or year period. Because if by some chance your document date and your posting date are different, your GL is not going to balance to the aging unless you choose posting date or year period. And then you would cut off, say, by 0430, the end of your month, and then you would hit print, and that's your aging. So that's really important because people will call and be like, it's out of balance, and that's often why. So that is a good thing to know. So I'll just show you, it's just your standard aging. Eventually it'll print out. So there you go, your aging. The other thing you might send to customers is a customer transaction report. So if I select customer from 12, if I just want from my customer 1200, and say I just, I want to, well, I'll just use all document dates. Do I want to include applied details, which would show the invoice and then less all the payments? Or do I just want to show the document itself with its current balance? Do I want to include fully paid documents? That's going to make your report pretty long. Do I want to sort by transaction type? Maybe. I'm just going to print it as it is. And that is something you could potentially send to your customer. And eventually this will print out. Come on. I don't know why it's taking so long. All right, so this is a big long report. It's only printing transactions that have a balance, okay? So you can see the transaction amount, and then if it's different, it means some payment or something was applied to it. So since I always use account number or customer 1200 for my sample transactions, there's a lot of data here, and you can see that's your bottom line. So that is a brief overview of AR transactions and AR reports and how they flow into bank rec, how they flow into the general ledger. So do you have any questions on any of that? Okay.
I'm just a little overwhelmed right now, but I'm sure it'll sink in at some point
Yeah,
when we start to use it.
and it'll
Yeah, I
be
think I'll have more questions once we're touching it.
once you're diving in. Yeah, and this
Yeah.
will be up on YouTube, so you can jump in and review anything we've discussed
Thank you.
when we're done. So I'll end the recording.